Joining us now is Bills radio color analyst, former Bills center, and host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. It is Eric Wood joining us after the long drive back to Louisville last night after the game. Eric, good to see you wide-eyed here, because that's not a drive I was prepared to take after that game.
No, and yeah, that was a pretty long day for us. We had a super long pregame with the 4:30, so just extra time to be locked in for that one. But you know what? Bill's victory made it all worth it. And the kids actually here in Louisville got a delay, 1 hour delay for school. So we all got an extra hour of sleep in the Wood household because it was too cold for some to wait out in the cold for the bus, which Steelers fans would say is extra soft compared to what we dealt with in Buffalo last weekend.
Yeah.
When they were poking fun of us from downtown Buffalo when Orchard Park's catching 3 feet of snow, most of which came Sunday at 1 when the game was supposed to be played. But all in good fun there. And yeah, the Bills win definitely makes it worth it.
Yeah, well, it's a nice win too because over this past 5 or 6 game stretch when they've had to win and kept in the conversation, we've had a lot of angst. And your blood pressure's skyrocketing in these games because it doesn't look like sometimes they're going to win. This one, there was maybe a stretch there in the third quarter when the Steelers got to 7 points. And then kicked off to Buffalo, and then Buffalo extended. But during that time when they got it to 7 points, that's really the time of the game when there was really some angst. But other than that, the Bills add their lead, and then it was a 2-score game again, and it was like, okay, let's go. This game was in full control except for that little stretch by Buffalo from start to finish.
Yeah, when they got up 21-0, and it looked like they were going to get up 24-0 right before the end of the half, it looked like the game was completely out of hand. Of course, then you get the field goal blocked. Pittsburgh gets 7 points before the half, and you come out of the half and go 3 and out. And then the injuries start mounting defensively. And yes, there was a touch of angst. And I'll tell you what, when you get those 2 injuries on the what should have been a fumble recovery by Spector, and that's not overturned there, and then you get 2 injuries there with Spector and Benford, and then you lose Terrell Bernard later. I'll tell you what, I was halfway sick to my stomach. Just one, I felt for those guys, and 2, you just kind of feel not that this game is slipping, but you just love the momentum that this Bills team has, and they've been able to piece it together defensively despite all the injuries this year. And then you're just thinking to yourself, how can they overcome these? And then you just saw incredible individual efforts. AJ Klein, who's supposed to be going on vacation with his family last week, credit him for staying in shape and be able to come in and make 11 stops in the game and be able to lead the defense and have an experienced guy in the middle of that defense be able to put the green dot on his helmet and be able to lead them down the stretch. But I went back after the game and looked at the win probability on one of the sports apps, and even when they cut it to 7, I think it was like an 88% win chance for the Bills by Yahoo Sports standards. And so maybe we felt the angst a little bit more than others in the public opinion, mainly because we've experienced some collapses this year, but it seems like ever since the bye, this team has turned that corner and with their backs against the wall have found a way to win all of these games down the stretch.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to see at the end of the game on defense, A.J. Klein, Kyer Elam, and I'm trying to remember the third guy that I'm trying to think of here. Oh, Dorian Williams were 3 of the top 4 tacklers in the football game when it came to the end. They really stepped in and stepped up for sure. We talked about it in the pregame, Eric, that we thought the Steelers could be had at the second level, their linebacker level, and it seemed like the Bills felt the same way based on how they utilized the tight ends early, the game Khalil Shakir had. It just seemed like they were victimizing the middle of the field and the second level of the defense all afternoon, almost to the point where they didn't even concern themselves with taking many shots down the field.
No, they did. And Josh Allen stayed incredibly patient all throughout this one. No risky plays. The only one that kind of got tipped up and looked like it could have been an interception was really just an underthrow by Josh. I thought he had the cover 2 Cover two, the Tampa 2 beater again, right down the seam. He hit Dalton Kincaid on that one early in the game and almost got Diggs on the same look in the red zone for a touchdown, which was a throw he wanted back based upon his reaction with his hands on top of his head, knowing that he missed a touchdown in that situation. But we heard from people that have worked with Joe Brady in the past that the way he likes to form a game plan is to figure out the weakness of the defense and attack it. In some weeks, it may be your number one receiver on the outside against a mismatch. Other weeks, it may look like the Dallas game where you're simply running the ball over and over if you're going to stay in super light personnel. And then we've seen multiple times with Joe Brady say, look, these linebackers are not athletic enough to keep up with our tight ends, with our slot receivers, and we're going to pick on them. And from the jump, they attacked them. They did it all throughout the game. That first drive of the game, Dawson Knox scores. Tight end gets the first touchdown 4 years in a row in the wild card round. That Dawson Knox gets the first touchdown of the game. And then that second tight end, the strike on the first play after the turnover, he hits Dalton Kincaid on the same play that I was just referring to Diggs that Josh missed later in the game, hits him right down the seam. And that's a great play call. It's anticipation of coverage. But Josh knew where he wanted to go with this football right as his play started. He identified the coverage, understood that Miles Jack is not going to be able to run with Dalton Kincaid down the seam. So there's your mismatch. Throws a perfect ball, and they get the score to hop up 14-0. I thought it was a masterful job offensively throughout this game of staying patient, taking what the defense gives them, not forcing anything, and then making the plays when they're there to be had.
When you see this game, it goes up 14-0. The Bills get the ball back, and Josh, snaps off this 52-yard run that, it's a work of art. And because it looks like he's going to slide, and everybody's saying, just get down. You got the first down, just get down, don't take the hit. And then he plows through the tackle by the safety and then literally outruns the secondary for the Steelers to the end zone. They were losing ground on him. A play like that, describe you're standing there on the sideline. You're a defensive player, you're a special teams guy like me, and you're watching your quarterback take off and snap off a play like that. Talk about what that does to the psyche of the entire team.
Oh, I mean, the entire team, the entire stadium, the broadcast booth, we were all giddy when we saw Josh rip that one off. And look, they kept Josh under wraps the first part of the season, saying, look, when the games are on the line, when we need it most, that's when we need Josh Allen to run, but we want him to play a certain style of offense. And we saw that through maybe the first half of the season. But like I mentioned before, with their backs against the wall, as me and Chris like to say on the broadcast, you can't hold anything back, and they're not holding back with Josh Allen now. They've used him as a weapon in the red zone, really, since Joe Brady's taken over as offensive coordinator. And there, they give Josh this freedom to run. And look, if you're going to run man-to-man defense against the Bills and bring pressure, if Josh breaks the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a big play. Is it always going to be 52 yards? No, but they tracked Josh Allen going 19.33 miles per hour on that play. It was the fastest of any Bills ball carrier in the game. And so, yes, when you're on the sidelines there and you see your quarterback who's got maybe the smallest ego of anyone on the entire field, the way he's willing to risk his body and put it all out there week in and week out, yeah, that'll fire up the troops.
All right, so let's spin forward a little bit here to Kansas City, because you've got a Chiefs team that many perceive as, over the last 5 years, one of the most vulnerable versions of this Kansas City Chiefs squad. And it feels like it's crazy to say that coming off a Super Bowl championship. They're the defending Super Bowl champions. But we've seen enough evidence of their offense to know they're not the same offense juggernaut attack that they used to be. And they're coming off a game in which I believe they went 1 for 5 in the red zone against the Dolphins. Harrison Butker is the leading scorer in the postseason. He's got 14 points because he was kicking field goals for them all last week. But they do have 2 extra days of preparation and rest for their players. What at first blush strikes you about this Chiefs matchup this time around, Eric?
Yeah, this is the team that you got to get over, and this is a team that's had the Bills number in the playoffs. In the regular season, the Bills have gone to Arrowhead. They've conquered those demons. You think back to the COVID game against the Chiefs, and they ran the ball down the Bills' throat. Well, in the regular season, we haven't lost to them since, and all those games have been at Arrowhead. But then we've had to go to Arrowhead each time that we've played them in the playoffs, and we've lost all of those games. So, I know these guys are excited to get them in Highmark Stadium and kind of flip the script. And, Arrowhead, Highmark Stadium, those are two of the loudest stadiums in the league. I always say, as an offensive player, there's a certain threshold of noise where we just can't communicate well. Anything over that's just gravy. It doesn't really impact you any further. In Highmark and Arrowhead, you can say one's 1A and 1B as far as loudest stadiums in the AFC, but neither of them, especially in the playoffs, are you going to be able to communicate well. So you get them in your house this week. The Chiefs played well against the Dolphins last week, and watching that game, and I watched it back I watched it live and then the condensed version back last night, and both times I was trying to think, is this more about Miami or more about Kansas City here? And it's a combination of both. I didn't think Miami played well. They also are just completely depleted on the defensive side of the football, and Kansas City was able to take advantage of that, but now they didn't capitalize in the red zone, like you said, or else that really could have been a blowout. And under Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they've consistently been a top 5 red zone offense, and they're always creative down there. And one of their 2 red zone touchdowns, they had to resort to the Wildcat. They put Pacheco in the Wildcat to get him into the end zone. And so this is going to be a big time matchup this week. Kansas City's offense hasn't played as well, and over the last few years, they've designated a lot of draft capital into that defensive side of the ball, and it's paid off. And they have one of the top defenses in the league this year, but then their offense has struggled. Rashee Rice, their second rounder from this year, played really well against the Dolphins, against a banged up Dolphins team and secondary, like I said, and we'll see what he can do in Highmark Stadium. But when he gets going, then that allows Travis Kelce, Scantling, Pacheco, a lot of those guys more opportunities when you have a downfield threat, because I feel like that's one of the things that they've been missing. Kelce's kind of their big play guy. Well, when you can put a lot of resources towards him, neutralize him in the game, then this Kansas City offense just hasn't been nearly as formidable. And when I look at this matchup and, the possibilities of corners and linebackers still being out this week, look, you got your 2 safeties, these guys that Sean McDermott just raved about, that are just dying to get a championship here to Buffalo, New York. You have this defensive line that you've invested a ton of draft capital and free agents to, that is playing at a high level. And look, there's going to be injuries throughout the season, and they generally happen in waves and position groups, and it's generally not a coincidence. You start getting injuries to a position group, then other guys get stretched thinner, and guys that are playing special teams as well are getting put into the game, and they're getting overworked, and those injuries stack. But then it's those position groups that are healthy. And when I'm looking at it, mainly this defensive line, this has got to be the answer. And I've come on this show in the past before, and one of the things I've been critical about this Bills team in the playoffs is the lack of a pass rush with a 4-man rush. And when you're going against guys like Mahomes and Burrow in the playoffs, you got to be able to put pressure on them with a 4-man rush. If they're able to get home this week, neutralize the line of scrimmage against the run in this Chiefs run game, and then in obvious pass situations, really apply pressure to Patrick Mahomes, this Bills defense can be successful against this Chiefs offense.
How big of an effect will the 6 days be instead of the 7 days between games?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. And that's to be seen. When you get guys dinged up, that extra day or 2 can really add to it. It's late in the season right now. Those extra days of rest can be pivotal. Now, when it's win or go home, can it play an effect, in how your body might feel throughout the week? Likely. But you're going out on Sunday and you're going to push through. And I would imagine from a physical standpoint that this isn't going to be a deal where we look back next Monday and say, well, the Bills were just still wore out from Pittsburgh. If this doesn't work out, we're not going to be making those excuses from an injury standpoint. I'm sure there are some guys that are dinged up which would love that extra day of rest. When I look in particular, a Taron Johnson who had to go into concussion protocol looked very healthy and in good spirits leaving the game. I don't want to speculate on anything because often head injuries, they're just a little mysterious in how they end up shaking out. But him in particular, and you think about an extra day or 2, that could have been pivotal.
Right, yeah, because clearing concussion protocol is obviously a step-by-step process, and sometimes players can't even make it out after being on that list for the week, so we'll hope for the best for Taron Johnson. Steve and I were actually hoping that maybe he was just kept out as a precaution regardless of what the examination revealed in the locker room, because it's like, hey, we're up 2 scores. Why don't you just sit out? We got this game in hand. And so I thought that we were kind of speculating, hey, maybe they just sat guys that got a little dinged and say, hey, look, we're already down a day of extra rest this week. Why don't you just start resting now?
Yeah, and I think there likely is some truth in that. So I just love Taron Johnson's game. I mean, I love everything about him as a player. He's been one of my favorite players to watch. This is a guy that I wish I would have gotten to play in the same locker room as. He's going into the locker room, and so he's sprinting to the tunnel, trying to get in the locker room to be able to go through the protocol, the analysis at the time because of the head injury. He's sprinting to the tunnel. There's a pivotal third down coming up for Pittsburgh. He stops right at the edge of the tunnel so that he can watch the play, and they're trying to corral him up the tunnel, and he refuses to go because he wants to watch his guys out there on the field for this pivotal third down play. And to me, very small moment, but just another thing that just epitomizes who he is. And no one was maybe he was more excited, but no one in my position was more excited to see him make the All-Pro team last week, because this is a guy who I felt like has earned it for a number of years. He flies mainly under the radar because of some bigger names on this defense, but man, what he's allowed Buffalo to do in being able to stay in nickel defense constantly. He matches up with tight ends well. He matches up with slot receivers, and he is a weapon versus the run. It was awesome to see him get that All-Pro nod last week.
Eric, thanks as always for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you on the weekend.
All right, sounds good. Look forward to see you guys this weekend.